week on Storyboard, we continue our conversation with John Montgomery, EVP Brand Safety GroupM, as he speaks to us about ad fraud and brand safety. We also speak to Sunay Bhasin, Chief Marketing Officer, MTR Foods, about how MTR is making breakfast in 3 minutes. And Polycab has launched a new campaign for its house buyers category. What is so unique about this campaign? Well, there are 11 unique TVCs with regional specific scripts and casting. We get to see this campaign on notice board this week. Hello and welcome to Storyboard. This is Shibani Gharat. Last week we caught up with John Montgomery, EVP Brand Safety GroupM, and spoke to him about why viewability matters. This week we have a conversation with him about ad fraud, and he believes ad fraud is criminal and very rampant in Asia. What is the solution for marketers in such a scenario? Let's take a look at this conversation to find out.
John, last week we spoke about viewability. This week I want to talk to you about ad fraud.
Yeah.
So that's another area of huge concern to marketers. So what are the 2-3 major concerns in ad fraud, and what is GroupM doing to help clients understand how to stop worrying about ad fraud?
Ad fraud is criminal.
Right.
It's a deliberate attempt to mislead us into thinking that there's an impression when there's not an impression. So it's more egregious, and I think it's something that our clients feel very concerned about, and it's something that we should be addressing. The bad news with ad fraud is it's higher in Asia, and we suspect in India as well. We'll talk about measurement in a minute, because there's a very important element here missing, is that we don't really understand it well enough. So the bad news is that we suspect that it's higher here than it is elsewhere in the world.
Why is it still suspect? Why don't you know, as India's largest media agency?
No, it's a great question, and I think it's one that we're tackling first. Is we don't have reliable measurement in either fraud or viewability yet. So we are tagging campaigns here and there, and we have some sense of ad fraud. But I've seen ridiculously high numbers, and I've seen numbers from publishers which are, I think, too low. We have our own numbers which are between 10 and 15%. Now that's much higher than elsewhere in the world. But let's take our own numbers, which I think are on the conservative side, because we buy in fairly safe environments.
Right.
So we don't buy in open exchanges in the main, we buy in safe environments. But I think once we start tagging all of our campaigns and measuring all of our campaigns, it'll take us a couple of months before we get some good fraud benchmarks. It doesn't mean that we won't do anything about it in the meantime, but only if you measure could you really understand where the highest areas of risk are and where they're not. So that's our very first prerogative is to measure and understand.
Right. Whose job is it to measure that?
It's ours with the permission of a client, and also our publisher partners need to allow us to tag our ads on their sites.
Right.
So it's a joint industry
thing. The publisher to agree to
That's
what
correct.
you want to do. So is that easy to do?
Yes, I think so, and I think that they'll realize that in order for us to gain trust and to gain and therefore move investment, they're going to need to do that. And so the publishers we've spoken to are, I think, in the main, they've got some concerns about data security and the quality of measurement and stuff like that. But I think that those are easy enough for us to discuss. And so far we think that our publishers are very open to that. So that's the bad news. The bad news is that fraud might be higher here than it is elsewhere. The good news is it's fairly easy for us to mitigate.
Right.
If we use anti-fraud technology, there are a number of ad tech companies that are available to us here in India that can screen for fraud and in fact prevent our advertising from appearing on fraud sites. So they blacklist those fraud sites that they know about, and they detect other fraud sites that are new and then put them on the blacklist. And so with a relatively short period of time, we think that we can bring those numbers right down.
Right.
You know, fraud in Europe is down to under 2%, in the US is down to under 3%. There's absolutely no reason why we can't get it down.
Blacklisting and whitelisting both are ongoing processes for you.
That's correct. You know, the whitelisting process is used more in contextual brand safety, when we're very worried about where we and it's quite a difficult thing to. So whitelist, you're literally hand selecting each one of the sites or each one of the properties that you're going on. So that limits reach and obviously increases costs. Whereas I think that the
blacklisting,
the technology uses a sort of a blacklisting procedure and detects fraud and blocks fraud in a way where it's very reliable, and you can still do it at scale. So you know, I think the very important thing for us to do is to start to measure and then apply and use those ad tech vendors. Now, those ad tech vendors come at a cost because there's a small CPM cost. But if we can take fraud numbers down by just 2, 3, 4%,
that pays for that.
Easily pays for that. And so that is you know, I know
we're in that. Is it that
no
it can't go from your margin? The market is spending.
We will do all of the administration and we will do all of the ad serving, but the actual cost is a straight pass-through cost to our clients, very much like an ad serving cost.
Right. Perfect. So now let's get to the issue of brand safety. There are not very many conversations in India about brand safety yet.
Yes.
Why do you think there should be conversations about brand safety?
This is a question I get asked a lot, and you'll recall that there were no conversations about brand safety at all until February the 9th.
Absolutely.
And what happened on February the 9th, in case your viewers aren't familiar, is that there was a headline in the London Times, which is one of the oldest and most venerable newspapers in the world, that called out, and the headline is burnt into my retina. It said, "Big brands fund terror." And that's not what we want to hear in the business. I mean, the reality is that the amount of money that went through to any terrorist site was minuscule. I don't think it even hit hardly hit double figures. That's not the point. I think firstly, any pound or dollar that goes to an inappropriate site is a dollar too much.
Right.
But of course, it's the reputational or potential reputational damage. No brand wants to be seen by any viewers to be supporting inappropriate sites, and even less so, they want to see themselves called out in the press.
Problems of programmatic buying, that the bots are buying it?
No, you know, I don't think so. I think programmatic gets its bad boy image unfairly. Right. It's a little bit like blaming road accidents on motor cars. It's not the motor car, right? It's the operator. And I think programmatic is just a technology that allows us to automate buying behavior using advanced data. I think the reason why programmatic often gets this reputation is because programmatic is used on open exchanges and in the long tail, and very often...
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. Just explain to my viewer what open exchanges are.
So, because of automation, because of the huge volume of advertising and the number of sites we buy from, we've automated media buying in much the same way as you've automated stock exchange buying. And in fact, it's very similar technology. So there's an exchange, very much like there's a stock exchange, with millions of sites that you can buy from. And we say we want this kind of audience, and it doesn't really matter where the audience is, but if I look like if I'm interested in buying a car, our algorithms will find me. And if I'm on a sports site, a high-quality Indian sports site, that's great. They'll serve me the ad. But if I happen to be on inappropriate content, I'd also get served the ad. Because remember, they're more interested in me than they are in the site. Yeah. So if I happen to stray into an inappropriate site, we don't want our advertising to be on inappropriate sites. So programmatic is just the technology. But there's a lot of stuff that we can do in programmatic. In fact, we found that programmatic is often safer if we buy in safe environments and if we use technology to help us mitigate against fraud. But if you go and buy out in the open market without any form of technology protection, you are going to end up on inappropriate sites. And so I think that if all that's happening is programmatic is being used badly, and therefore it gets a bad reputation. We found in other parts of Asia that we're actually safer in programmatic because in programmatic you're forced to measure. You have to tag programmatic in order to optimize. Absolutely. And when you're optimizing away from fraud and towards higher viewability. So in many cases for our branded advertisers, we are moving advertising from direct into programmatic. because we're able to measure. There are parts of Asia where there's no third-party ad serving,
right,
and we're still reliant on first-party or publisher numbers.
Yeah, John, in the brand safety area, it's very clearly completely the job of the media agency to protect the client. There's not much the client can do. Publisher has got a vested interest, the bad sites.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that? And again, who pays for it? Because all these things come at a cost.
No, of course. And I think the first thing is that the awareness of brand safety overall has to happen inside client and publishers and agencies. I think it accentuates the agency's role as the custodian of the brand safety in the marketplace, and we see it. They wouldn't have appointed someone like me to oversee this if it's something we didn't take extremely seriously. And in fact, as a result of the demand for this, we've hired a person in Asia and in Europe and the States specifically for brand safety as well, to kind of instill brand safety into our culture. But from a client perspective, it's very, very important for them to understand and also to support this. If without clients being prepared to move money towards safer environments, when I say safer, I mean better quality, so more viewable, absolutely, lower fraud and contextually safe environments, this wouldn't work. When Mark Pritchard stands up as the custodian of the world's biggest brands and biggest budgets and says that brand safety and transparency in the digital supply chain is important, that's hugely beneficial for our market, because not only do publishers say this is a real serious thing, so it's not just me waving my arms around demanding brand safety, but it's clients not only talking about it and demanding it, but being prepared to put their money where their mouths are.
Or remove their money where their mouths are.
Absolutely, and I think that a lot of major clients, Mark, who does at P&G, and Keith Weed of Unilever have stood up and been very, very strong, and we're lucky to work with both Unilever and P&G in many regions, and we know that they are moving money towards that. They're rewarding publishers for better quality inventory. That's what will move the market. Money talks, as clearly.
Thank you so much, John, and all the best for it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed talking to you.
It is time for us to take a short break. When we return, we speak to Sunaib Haseem, Chief Marketing Officer, MTR Foods, about their new 3-minute breakfast range and the new campaign.